Well, they will continue to up to 100, I believe, today and tonight. And the National Guard, the decision by the mayor to ask for National Guard late last night. Mayor knows I don't really sleep that much anyway, so I was up and ready for a call and called General Neely, who jumped on it, and we acted quickly. And they are, we have 125 immediately engaged, and others on their way, 375 in total.
What happens if they're confronted?
Well, their job is to provide a perimeter. They're not going to be on the front lines. There's been a lot of discussion about that and what their role would be, but they're really there to provide a perimeter so that the center of the city doesn't get overtaken the way that it seemed to in certain times last night.
We're going to let Mary Ann ask a few, and then we've got to wrap this up.
Thank you. There are questions of whether 375 are actually enough. We're hearing reports this afternoon of issues in Tinley Park. They've now issued a curfew for tonight. Several malls across the suburbs.
Sure.
It isn't just the city of Chicago.
That's right.
So will 375 actually be enough? Well,
375 National Guardsmen, another 100 state police, and each of us, the state police in particular, has the ability and does, in fact, on a regular basis, assist local law enforcement. But I also want to point out that there is a network of police departments in a system called ILEAS, where law enforcement agencies share resources across lines. And so for many of the other towns and cities that need additional resources, they can turn to ILEAS as well. So there really are, resources available at all levels here for law enforcement to get assistance.
Dana Kozlov is asking, are you concerned that their presence will inflame the violence?
I'm going to let the mayor answer that because it was her decision to ask for the help.
No, I'm not. And to go back to the question that Rick asked, what happens if they're confronted, they're every bit as well trained as our officers are. They are trained to come into these circumstances. The particular assets that are going to be initially deployed are military police officers. So I have every confidence that they will show exactly the same kind of restraint that our officers do, and we're not going to let them get into a difficult circumstance that they can't handle.
Dave McKinney is wondering, is there more you can tell us about whether any of the looters have known connections to alt-right groups? And is this criminal aspect of the protests that we're seeing here and in other cities something that warrants the FBI?
The FBI is very much involved, and they have been with us really along every single day and beforehand in its preparation. We're working in partnership with the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the ATF, particularly their bomb and arson units. It's too soon in the course of this investigation for us to be able to say definitively one way or the other. As I said before, what I can say, there's no question that some of the destruction that happened last night, particularly the arsons, were absolutely organized and coordinated. We'll learn more about this over time as the investigation takes its course, but I'm confident of that so far.
Mayor, you mentioned in your earlier 11 a.m. news conference about rethinking Phase 3.
Yes.
As even trying to get into the city is so difficult, and watching all the boarding up going on. Is Phase 3 really going to be happening on Wednesday? Should people plan on coming to work this week and going out to dinner this week in the city of Chicago?
Look, I think we have to have a lot more conversations, first and foremost, with our public health officials, and we've started those conversations very early this morning. I'm very concerned about the fact that while I think the vast majority of people that gathered in the streets were wearing masks, now we could have an interesting discussion about why and who was wearing masks. But the fact of the matter is there were thousands of people on the street in very close proximity to each other who were not social distancing. We know from both the governor's, I think, guidance and transparency around how COVID is spread, certainly ours as well. There are a number of asymptomatic people that are out there. I'm worried. I'm absolutely worried about a potential outbreak as a result of what we saw yesterday, thousands of people in cheek to jowl in small spaces, is exactly the opposite of what we have been preaching now for 10 weeks' time. I'm worried about it. I think it's too soon for us to say. We are still on track for reopening on Wednesday, but if that changes, we will certainly let people know as quickly as possible. Let me just also just say this last piece. There are many things that were heartbreaking about what happened last night. But I will also say that for those businesses that have been closed down for 10 weeks in River North and really all over the city, that were starting to prepare, had put out, in many instances, brand new patio furniture, wanting to give their workers an opportunity to earn money and to provide entertainment for people in the city, to see their hard work and their money and resources literally go up in flame, their property reduced to kindling. That's heartbreaking. And that kind of lawlessness, as I think State's Attorney Fox said so incredibly eloquently, that's not First Amendment expression. That's criminal conduct. And my heart aches for the people who suffered the loss that we saw all over the city.
Marianne, this will be your last one, and then we'll go online.
I've got two. You got to let me have two. Governor, do you agree, this is from Hannah Mizell, do you agree that an indefinite curfew, something that hasn't been seen in Chicago for decades, is the right course of action? The ACLU calls it broad and vague, which could lead to, quote, arbitrary and discriminatory enforcement, and is exploring possible litigation.
Well, I can't say that these are decisions that get made at the local level. I think that certainly anybody who watched what happened last night and the night before too would have to understand the need for a curfew of some sort. And so I think that it seemed to be helpful to the police. To Chicago police last night, as there was a curfew. It really kept most of the people off the streets. The people who were breaking the curfew were, of course, the very people who were doing the damage that was done.
And
This is your last one.
Right. Rich Miller is asking, if the protests cause an upswing in COVID cases, would you consider putting Chicago into its own region, its own IDPH region?
Well, we'll have to look forward to what happens over the next 2 to 3 weeks. But I am deeply concerned, and the mayor said it, I said it in my remarks, I am deeply concerned that when you gather people together, large groups of people, even when they're wearing masks, in very small or large groups in spaces that they can't socially distance and don't, we do run that risk. And so we'll have to look at this going forward. But I at the moment, we're not heading backward, but I think that it is a warning to everybody that is protesting, just to, that if you could, have the decency to spread out in the process of doing it. Of course, the lawlessness is completely unacceptable and not tolerated. But I am concerned about the COVID-19 that can spread even in a peaceful demonstration, so people should just take it easy on each other.
Well, we have one question from Shia online that has been answered. Why is the reaction so much stronger to George Floyd's death than Laquan McDonald's, and is it setting the state back in terms of achieving racial equity?
I think if you don't mind, Mayor.
I wouldn't say, look, there was a very strong reaction to the death of Laquan McDonald, let's be clear. I was worried that our city would be up for grabs because it was coming on the heels of Eric Garner, what happened in Ferguson and other incidents across the country. We've had this accumulation without seeing progress. And again, I have to credit the state's attorney, the casualness with which this individual killed George Floyd with his hand in his pocket, knowing he was videotaped without a care in the world, seemingly. That is such a deep offense and so unnecessary. George Floyd wasn't, if you see the pieces of video that have now surfaced, he wasn't resisting. I still don't even understand why he was down in the street, let alone with somebody with a knee on his neck as he is literally gasping for life and then watching the life leave him there on that street, the callous way in which he was treated even in death. That's a hard thing to bear for anyone. And as a black woman, I can't even begin to describe yet because I'm still processing it, what that did to me. And I know